1 or 2 showers possible, but feeling warmer, 16 or 17 Celsius. Similar on Monday and Tuesday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening, I am Bev Turner, but tonight I identify as Mark Dolan. And if you tweet in at GB News to tell me that's not true, I will not be offended. Unlike the LGBTQ etc. crowd who've had an epic flounce about Ricky Gervais. I'm going to be discussing that with my fantastic panel. Wimbledon tennis tournament removing female marital status from plaques. And we have a superb interview that Mark recorded with England Rugby World Cup winner Steve Thompson about his diagnosis of early onset dementia. Steve's story puts into perspective all those melting snowflakes who now retreat to bed at the first sign of a sniffle. So let's debate, are we becoming a nation of hypochondriacs? Oh, and Winnie the Pooh is now a slasher movie. Stay tuned. First, the news headlines with Polly.
Thanks, Bev. Good evening. The top stories. Officials in Texas have admitted the police made the wrong decision to wait nearly an hour before breaking into the classroom where a gunman killed 19 primary-age children and 2 of their teachers. Children were calling for help for emergency services on 911 from their mobile phones in the classroom long after Salvador Ramos had entered with an assault rifle. Officers were waiting for backup, though, in the hallway outside. Director of Texas Department for Public Safety, Stephen McCraw, said they should have entered right away.
And for the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you, from what we know, we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can.
In news here at home, a Conservative MP has submitted a letter of no confidence in Boris Johnson following the publication of the Sue Gray report. Sir Bob Neill, who chairs the Commons Justice Committee, said the Prime Minister's explanations for his behaviour lacked credibility. That comes after the Tory MP Paul Holmes resigned as Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Home Office, saying it was because of the toxic culture in Number 10. Deputy Leader Labour leader, Angela Rayner, has accused the Prime Minister of trying to save his own skin by changing the ministerial code. Ministers will no longer automatically lose their job for minor violations. Instead, the Prime Minister can choose to order a lesser sanction, including a public apology or a salary suspension. It comes as the Prime Minister faces an inquiry by the Commons Privileges Committee into whether he misled Parliament over Partygate.
This is clear the Prime Minister's running out of road and he's desperately trying to save his own skin. It's up to Conservative MPs now to do something about this, to protect our democracy and say that enough is enough. You know, you can't carry on like this. You can't keep breaking the rules and then when you don't like the rules, you change them.
Angela Rayner. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson himself says the government's £21 billion energy support package is a substantial commitment from the government to help the UK through the cost of living crisis. His comments came as the Chancellor refused to rule out a further emergency package next year.
I'm not going to pretend that this is going to fix everything for everybody immediately, and there are still going to be pressures, but it's a very, very substantial commitment by the government to getting us through what will be, I'm afraid, still a bumpy time with the increase in energy prices around the world.
A Metropolitan Police officer will go on trial in February next year, accused of 44 offences, including 21 counts of rape. The alleged offences relate to a dozen women over a 17-year period. PC David Carrick, who served as an armed officer with the Parliamentary Protection Command, has been suspended. He's pleaded not guilty to 15 of the charges. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, and this is GB News. Now back to Bev.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Bev Turner. Don't tell Mark, they've built me a better show than usual. An even better show than usual, I should say, of course. In my big opinion, I'll tell you what I think about Ricky Gervais's offending the LGBT lot with his new show on Netflix. Are the laughter police stealing all the fun? In my big question, has the pandemic left us as a nation of hypochondriacs frightened of everything? And don't worry, you will still get a dose of Dolan as in the Mark Meets segment. He's done a moving interview with brilliant England Rugby World Cup winner Steve Thompson about his heartbreaking autobiography. Coming up in the news agenda, whether Wimbledon should remove Miss and Mrs from the Women's Honours Board, and Winnie the Pooh, the slasher movie. And reacting with me to this and more, my brilliant all-star panel tonight, former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, TV personality and impressionist Francine Lewis, and columnist Ali Mirage. I guarantee that we will squeeze every last drop of knowledge and entertainment from all of our stories tonight, so that when you're making polite chat with Granny over Jubilee celebrations later in the week, you will at least have something to talk about. Maybe not Winnie the Pooh mass murderer, but definitely something. And I want to hear from you throughout the show, of course. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Big stories, big guests, big debate and big opinions. Let's start with this one. Now, it's Friday night. I'm not normally here on a Friday night, but it's lovely to be here. It's the best moment of the week, isn't it? Time to relax, have a few laughs. But younger viewers, you may want to sit down because this revelation may come as a bit of a shock. There was a time when jokes about race, sexuality and gender were considered funny. I know, we old folk have really lived. It wasn't even that long ago, probably less than 10 years. But it used to be fun to think, talk, and laugh out loud about observable differences between people. The subtext was not always that one type of person was necessarily better than another. There was rarely a value judgment. We were just allowed to recognise difference, whether it was between men and women, races, the mother-in-law, the Irishman, the barmaid. Observable difference was worth noticing and laughing about. You know those mates who affectionately hold a mirror up to your idiosyncrasies, the ones who take the mick out of your hair or your new trainers. It was that sort of humour, but on TV, pointing out distinction without callousness, harmless reflections rooted in natural human fascination. Ricky Gervais got a literal and metaphorical standing ovation this week for his new stage show, Supernature, in which he took on, amongst others, the LGBT community, specifically the What is a Woman debate. And instead of tiptoeing around pronouns like a politician tensing their sphincter on the one show in case they got it wrong, Gervais thrust himself fist first into the issue and drew enormous belly laughs from the audience, as well as horrified gasps from LGBT rabble-rousers.
The old-fashioned women. Oh, God. You know, the ones with wombs. Oh. Those dinosaurs. No, I love the new women. I know the new women. They're great, aren't they? You know, the new ones we've been seeing lately. The ones with beards and they're as good as... They're as good as gold. I love them. No, it's the old-fashioned with it. And now the old-fashioned, they're like, oh, they want to use our toilets. Why shouldn't they use your toilets? For ladies. They are ladies. Look at their pronouns. What about this person that isn't a lady? Well, his penis. Her penis, you bigot.
Organisation GLAD described his set as a graphic, dangerous, anti-trans rant masquerading as jokes. GLAD described themselves as rewriting the script for LGBTQ acceptance, presumably a really dull script with no gags to pull people along with them. Laughter is a universal human characteristic. It forms bridges that bring people together. If you've ever had a bust-up with the missus, you know everything is only OK when you can finally laugh about the fact that she threw the bolognese all over the kitchen, right? Otherwise, it's the elephant in the room, sitting oppressively in the air, leading to seething resentment and fake harmony. That atmosphere suppresses evolution of thought. It stifles learning. And I've started to notice recently that the difference between po-faced activists taking offence at some imagined subtext and those who view humanity open-heartedly with a palate attuned to all tastes is simply the ability to take a flipping joke. The humour police, those thieves of joy, steal our laughter and instead throw us into spiky identity squabbles, which subvert the standards of respect that we should be aiming for. We are now dangerously self-censoring. We are forced to mistrust not only other people, but worse, our own internal morality. It is possible to wish no harm whatsoever on any transgender person and still find humour in an individual calling themselves a woman with a penis in their pants. And this isn't to defend power-abusing bosses who sack the busy intern, busty intern, because she couldn't take a joke. It's not denying the difficult life journey that trans or gay people might have had. I am not advocating unkind finger-pointing. But fear of the comedy constabulary transforms every one of us into judges, passing verdicts on what is appropriate, when what makes you giggle is entirely an individual concern. We grow to fear expressing opinions outside of insular groups. We retreat into tribes, that awful phrase, the safe space. Those who live in victim cults preaching inclusiveness with a straight face are only creating division. They splinter and fracture us into warring tribes. These days, it feels as though some people covet fragility as a virtue and then use their oversensitivity to punish others. GLAD weren't happy with just accusing Gervais of hatred. They went straight to his boss, of course, Netflix, and lodged a complaint with them. No invitation for a coffee with Ricky to find out what upset them. They preferred to run to his boss and try to get him the sack. Absolute cowards. After banging on about this on TV earlier in the week, I was contacted on Twitter by a young woman who asked if I genuinely felt it was OK to poke fun at people with disabilities, for instance. My gut instinct was probably not, but only because it's not generally very funny. But this inquisitive stranger had made me think. So I sent her my number and asked if she had 5 minutes for a chat. Kiara Lawrence was born with learning disabilities and regularly reaches out to people like me to help us understand why jokes at the expense of those with extra needs can evoke the pain of school bullying. She interviews people about this on her podcast, Kiara's Pink Sparkle Pod, and I am more than happy to give it a plug. We both agreed that Channel 4's The Last Leg, a comedy show against the backdrop of disability, is one of the cleverest, funniest shows on TV. More, not fewer conversations with people who are not like us is the only way to develop a truly pluralistic society. We were moving on from judging a person by their sexuality, gender or skin colour, but now, hung up on identity politics, which reduce a person from their character to the melanin in their skin, the pronoun they prefer, or the person they wish to have sex with, feels like a backward step. In a world without prejudice, shouldn't these characteristics be less relevant, not more? And shouldn't we be free to laugh at one another because we are all ridiculous in some way and still be friends in the morning? Social justice warriors need to toughen up and learn to take a joke. So, my panel now to find out what they make of this particular issue. Peter, I want to start with you. You were listening to all that. Reactions, please.
Well, I've not seen Ricky Gervais' show. Obviously, he did a great sketch show 20-odd years ago with The Office. I don't think his stand-up is quite my cup of tea, but from what I've seen, it's interesting that I think he's actually trying to satirise both sides of the argument. He was trying to satirise woke culture and the perception of very young people who might be offended by everything, but I think he was also trying to satirise libertarians who falsely say that comedy is being cancelled and free speech is being shut down when they're not. And I think he's trying to land somewhere in the middle with a very heavy dose of irony, but it's such a difficult balancing act to pull off, and I'm not sure he does, although I've not seen the whole show. And the reason why I say it is difficult to land in the middle of those 2 points is because there is still prejudice in society. I think we've got much, much better in my lifetime on things like gay rights. There's clearly prejudice against trans people today, and you don't have to go back too far in British society to remember those signs on pub doors about, no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. So, yes, society's made huge steps forward since those days and the days of Bernard Manning appearing on BBC One with some somewhat gutless presenters failing to challenge him. But there is still prejudice in society, and there is still prejudice against trans people. So that makes me cautious, even though I can kind of see what Ricky Gervais was trying to do, which was satirise both extremes of the argument.
Thank you, Peter. Francine, Peter, I'm sure is right that there is genuine prejudice against trans people. For instance, if a trans person goes for a job and someone who identifies as their birth gender goes for a job, I don't know, but I'm guessing that the world maybe isn't quite ready, as some employers are more likely to go for the person who identifies as the gender they were born in. I guess that's genuine prejudice. But that, Francine, is very different, is it not, to joking about the topic?
Yes, I do think so. And, you know, you just played it just now and I laughed. And I don't feel I should be ridiculed for laughing. You know, it was funny. It might be insulting. I totally understand that. But, you know, being someone in comedy, I think it's become so hard to go out and be funny and worry about everything and everyone you're going to offend. You know, it's very, very difficult. And Ricky Gervais is funny and very edgy. And I think if you're going to pay to see Ricky Gervais, you're going to get that kind of comedy and humour. Personally, I wouldn't have the... I just wouldn't say those sort of jokes. I just wouldn't feel right about it. So
Why?
it's not something I would do.
You are a comedian. Why wouldn't you make those sorts of...
I just wouldn't, because I would be worried about offending, and that is my problem.
Would you have always been worried, or would you be more worried now than you would have been?
I never used to be worried. Oh, my God, I remember doing all the EastEnders. I remember naming Pat Butcher Fat Pat, and, you know, when I went on to Britain's Got Talent and I did Sharon from EastEnders, I don't know if I can say it now, but, you know, I will. I did a little, because at the time Jack and Phil wanted to marry her, and I did a little rhyme. Jack and Phil went up the hill, fighting to get me to the altar. Jack got shot, Phil lost the plot, and I found out I was Miss Piggy's daughter. Now, I won't be able to say that now because I would have people saying, like the humour police, saying that's really cruel, you're taking the mick. So, yeah, things have really changed. But Ricky Gervais has made a fair point. He is including all minorities in his comedy, and that would include the trans community. And the thing is, Ricky, I mean, I love his comedy. I think he's brilliant. And I don't think he meant it in a hurtful way. I just think that's how he is. Like, I totally think Jimmy Carr, when he says things, I feel they're quite offensive, but I don't feel that with Ricky Gervais. And, you know, it's a shame that the trans community did get offended over that. And
well, Ali, Mirage, thanks, Francine. Ali, if I can just, in the whole of the sketch, Ricky does make the point, actually, that he knows that the one demographic, let's say, who are going to complain is going to be the trans community. And he says that and he said, I defend trans rights, I defend all human rights. And yet he says, I know that that's the group that's going to cause problems for me. And he was right, because they are the ones who are causing, who've gone to his boss to try and get him sacked. What's going on there, Ali? Is it just that this is a fairly new phenomenon, that we hasn't quite been through that evolutionary sort of cultural process that we've already been through with race and gender?
Well, I think, Bev, people are getting offended on all sorts of things. I mean, there are professional offence takers out there all over the place. I mean, I've watched it, actually, and I must say I did find a lot of it very funny indeed. And he poked fun at everyone, poked fun at women in hijabs, poked fun at disabled people, even poked fun at the fact that he himself was a minority as a white male multi-millionaire. So he was even taking the mick out of himself.
Yeah.
So, look, comedy is a space which is edgy, it should be experimental, it should hold a mirror up to society. And the reason why comedy is so important for a space where this can take place is because we're so constrained now in our general discourse about discussing difficult issues around gender, sometimes race, and we've come a long way. But at the moment, there are serious discussions going on where a lot of women feel completely marginalised by the trans debate. Some serious conversations need to be had. And comedy is one of those areas where you can actually have that conversation in an environment where it is edgy. Of course it will offend people. But look, he was even taking the mick out of religious people, talking about the fact that, you know, if you're ill, you should be having chemotherapy, not just praying to God, right?
That's
so
right.
He was making all sorts of jokes on all sorts of things. He's always done it. Look, people like Jimmy Carr, I don't like Jimmy Carr's humour, but again, I don't think he should be cancelled. I don't think Dave Chappelle should be cancelled. I love Family Guy. I mean, completely politically incorrect in this day and age. And what I find really sad is people like Matt Lucas and Russell Brand and others who are now going back retrospectively and being ashamed of what they said before and saying they wouldn't do it again. What Ricky Gervais said in his, in one of the things he says, and by the way, it's not only a series of jokes, he's also giving some lessons in there. He's saying, 10 years ago, we didn't know that if a woman didn't have an appendage, that this would be a problem, but now it basically is. You don't know what's going to happen in 10 years and what people are going to find offensive that you say today. So by that yardstick, you can't say anything to anyone ever.
Peter, I just want to bring you back in. What are you thinking as you're listening to that defence of free speech, free comedy, the ability to offend, and the ability of the person listening to switch off?
Well, I think you've got to be clear who the targets are, and I've not seen all the show, but, you know, I'm a Christian. Think about something like the life of Brian. I think that was done in a different way. That was obviously hugely controversial, and perhaps now it's on a Sunday afternoon, and it's quite friendly, but, you know, 30-odd years ago, the life of Brian was very controversial, but actually Christians are a minority in the country, and Christianity is an established part of the culture, and there isn't widespread oppression of Christian people in Britain. Whereas I think perhaps if you are a young Muslim woman and you see some of Ricky Gervais's jokes, you might feel very uncomfortable, even though I do get Ricky Gervais is ultimately trying to undermine both sides of the argument.
Really? I'll tell you the joke he said, right? He said Boris Johnson made a joke about women in hijabs, which a lot of women Muslim women found offensive, right? He made a joke and he said, Boris Johnson said women in hijabs look like letterboxes, etc. It's not what Boris Johnson should say to them. They don't need to take advice from Boris Johnson on what they can wear. It's their husbands that they'll turn to. A lot of people would find that very funny. Even Muslim women would find it funny because a lot of them are not subservient to their husbands in any way, shape or at all, but it's funny, it's hilarious. You're laughing at yourself.
But isn't the joke there that he's making exactly a joke around female independence? I don't think he's undercutting female independence. He's saying women can decide what they want to do.
Yeah, he's making a joke. He's poking fun.
And he does
That's why he was poking fun at religion. The only reason, Peter, why Christians in this country are like taking it on the chin is because they're reducing in number, right? And frankly, they're not getting offended. Perhaps they should get offended. I mean, look at Jerry Springer, the opera, right? The reason why Christians in this country are not getting offended, frankly, is because a lot of them are not going to church anymore, right? That's part of the issue.
Well, I'm not sure Christians are reducing in number, but the church attendance is down.
You're saying they're a minority. They're not a minority in this country. It's just that we're becoming a more secular country, right? But anyway, we're digressing. The point is we should be able to take things on the chin, and if you don't like it, just switch off.
That's what I say. You don't like it, you don't have to watch.
And he does say repeatedly in his set, in this particular set on Netflix, he keeps saying, there is going to be irony in this. Don't take everything I say so literally. So, I've just...
Well, that's exactly my point. That's what, although I don't like Jimmy Carr, that's what Jimmy Carr's trying to do. That's what Stuart Lee is trying to do by... You take a kind of a crude comment by someone that's perceived as right-wing, you repeat it or you exaggerate it, and you actually end up trying to essentially undermine people like Jeremy Clarkson and not oppress groups. And that's obviously how irony works. But obviously some left-wing newspapers tend to miss this point entirely and get work themselves up into quite a lather. But at the same time, we've all, and I'm sure we all are, sensitive to where there is still prejudice in society today.
Yeah, but look, Bev, one other point, right? Ricky Gervais, in the actual skit, talks about the fact that words are not violence. He's talking about actually punching a disabled kid in a thing, which a lot of people would find very offensive.
Yeah.
He's making a joke about this, right? And he's saying, look, words are not violence. I'm not actually calling to bring on a disabled child and hit them, for Pete's sake. Of course he's not. He's actually pointing this out because he knows that people are so nuts these days, they'll misinterpret that he's actually doing. He's actually making a point, right, that this is actually a joke, right? Words are not actual violence, and people now regard words as inflicting physical harm. We hear about this. This is completely, utterly bizarre that we've got to a stage where words are now... There used to be, when I was growing up, Bev, it used to be sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me.
Yeah.
We've gone into an environment now where we're so coddled, and Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff wrote a book about this, Coddling of the American Mind. We actually now psychologically believe that words can cause psychological harm to us. And this is very odd.
I need to stop you there, guys. We need to go for a break. But actually, you've kind of teed up our next section as well about the mollycoddling and the harm that might be caused by it. That is my all-star panel. They're going to be here for the night. Former editor... I'm sorry. You'll meet them. You've met them. You'll meet them as we go on. Anyway, right. After the break, we're asking tonight's big question, are we now a nation of hypochondriacs? I'll have a health anxiety expert and social media legend, Ivor Cummins, to discuss how the heck we move on after being infantilised by the government and terrified of being ill. Do not go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers.
We're on the same team, Nick.
Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. I am Bev Turner, identifying as Mark Dolan tonight. You have been getting in touch. Thank you. Russell has got in touch on email. Can you rephrase that as LGBTQI++? Oh, mate. I'm gay and I don't agree with some of the crowd. Some of us identify as LGB. Gareth on email. The normal people of the United Kingdom are extremely offended by the mainstream media, yet we don't cancel them. And Michael said on email... a brilliant opening monologue, Bev. Thank you, Michael. I feel sorry for people who can't laugh. So do I. Do you know who else I feel sorry for? I feel sorry for people who feel sorry for themselves all the time. It is time for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day from multiple points of view. Now, throughout the pandemic, we were bombarded with messages telling us to believe that we may be sick even if we felt A-OK. We have been taught to be hyper-vigilant about pathogens which are unlikely to harm us but must be feared, mollycoddled by the government and urged to be on tenterhooks for the next virus. Monkeypox, mania, anyone? Moneypox, appropriately. So are we becoming a nation of hypochondriacs? I am delighted to say that I am joined in the studio by Ivor Cummins, Twitter legend known as the Fat Emperor. Now, Ivor, you were the first man to wake me up to the fact that the danger I was hearing about from the mainstream media didn't seem to match the reality around me. So when we were going to talk about this notion of what has happened to us in the last 2 years, our perception of risk, are we more fearful now? How do we get out of this? I'm so happy you're here. What has happened in the last 2 years, and was it already happening?
Yeah, well, Bev, no, delighted to be here. And yeah, I think it's been happening for many decades, actually. There's been a process of kind of safism occurring.
Safism. I love that. What do you mean by safism?
So safism is a kind of a movement towards a disproportionate focus on safety, because safety is good, it's important, you know, road safety, and we've reduced accidents, lots of good stuff. But I have a friend who's a kind of historian and a technical manager, a senior leader, and he's into psychology too. And he's been watching what I've seen, that safety has become more and more dominant to the point that it goes beyond the cost benefit. It gets into risks that are so low that we shouldn't really be overly focusing on them. And he's seen that happening in his power generation roles, and I've seen it in corporate. So I think the whole of society has been moving steadily towards risk aversion, risk intolerance, almost to an irrational point. And then COVID came in, and that's where things really exploded.
So, but am I right in saying that it all started with litigation? I generally think the major changes in society can normally be traced back to lawyers. At some point, there's a solicitor making a lot of money and signing a lot of papers, right? And it feels like health and safety legislation has ramped up over the last, what, probably 40 years, 80? Hang on a minute, 80s is more than 40 years ago. I keep forgetting what year we're in. But 80s and 90s, and the adverts, have you been injured at work? Was it your fault? All of that has started it, didn't it?
Yeah, that's a big driver. And of course, the insurance industry as well is making nice profits out of this whole thing as well. But certainly, I mean, around 15 or 20 years ago, I have 5 kids, and I began to hear that the schools were banning running in the playground. Now, that's clearly absurd. I mean, that's an offence to childhood. And yet it was happening. And that was being driven by insurance claims. So there wasn't some, you know, nasty corporation driving some agenda. It was just naturally happening by this litigious environment. So that is one driver that's remorselessly been pushing it forward. But then there are the whole safety teams and quangos and corporate bureaucracies of safety that increasingly legislate themselves for everything because it gives them a bigger role. And it's a natural human thing to keep on driving the stuff that makes you the expert, the leader. So there's an effect there as well.
Oh. OK, so what happened during the last 2 years then, Ivor?
Well, yeah, big story. So essentially in February, March 2020, I did get involved with this because everyone was coming to me asking me, well, what's the risk? And I'm the risk person. So I was 20 years plus as a risk manager, crisis manager, master technologist in corporate, you know, people managing people as well. But I looked and I found very quickly the Diamond Princess. And rapidly I was able to see because...
And that was the cruise.
The cruise ship.
Which was a perfect kind of Petri dish of analysis, wasn't it?
It was. No single piece of data or scenario was perfect, but it was as close as you could get.
Yeah.
So as Professor Michael Levitt, who saw the same thing, pointed out, it had 40 times the people density of the most dense city on Earth, Hong Kong. 40 times the
Because they're all in little cabins like that in bunk
Yes.
beds and all eating like on the buffet, right?
Air conditioning shared and no real precautions.
Yeah.
So we got to see that Petri ship, if you will, and we got to see that the fatality rate, because there were elderly people, a lot of them on board, there were 7 deaths or 8 deaths in the following several weeks, and there were people in their late 70s and 80s. And everyone else, there was no question of death. And there were 3,700. So you could do a quick calculation and say the upper bound in an extreme exposure scenario is around 0.15%. And that's exactly what Professor John Ioannidis, one of the most celebrated scientists, epidemiologists and doctor from Stanford in the world, did multiple studies in summer of 2020 and showed that from antibody tests, 0.15%. So it kept coming up. And now after 2 years, guess what? UK, which was hard hit by COVID and got multiple seasons, it's around the 0.1 something percent.
Yeah.
You know?
So you could see that, I could see that, but of course the majority of the public, I could only see that because you were telling me on YouTube, but the public were fed an unleavened diet of anti-science figures. So much of what we understood about the use of data went out the window. So much of what we understood about natural immunity was ignored. There were all of these markers of good medical, clinical, scientific process which were disregarded in the last 2 years. What has that done to the collective psyche of the country?
Yeah, well,
I know that's a big question. It's an existential one, Ivor. It's not beyond the limits of your capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I was a people manager for nearly 15 years as well, and I had to deal with grown, you know, men and women crying in the room at me from anxiety, performance anxiety. So I have a lot of experience of that, and I'm a people watcher. So yes, our people have come from being too safest, I would say, generally, and they've gone rapidly downhill to a really bad place, generally speaking. And we have people now, we know the extremes, people wearing a mask in a car on their own. I mean, that is essentially psychosis.
But we've normalised psychosis.
We have essentially...
And we've normalised OCD. We normalised sterilising hands obsessively.
Yeah, and it wasn't even spread. We knew from early on it was aerosol spread. And just to the mask example, we had mask experts in Congress testifying. One guy who testified in 400 cases of environmental exposure to even anthrax. He's an expert. And he went through exactly why the masks have almost no effect on an aerosol. It all completely goes out through the gaps.
But the fear was such that everybody presumed that the pathogen was walking around and that healthy-looking people were potential source of death. And I want to bring in another guest now. Jade Thomas is a health anxiety expert. Hello, Jade. If you are there, because you work with people who obviously suffer from health anxiety. Hello. Tell us, first of all, what is health anxiety? Isn't that what we used to call a hypochondriac?
Yeah, so health anxiety and hypochondriacs are kind of one and the same, but essentially health anxiety is an obsessive, irrational worry about having a medical condition or becoming sick. And I want to emphasise that it is an irrational worry. So it's not just when you maybe have a tickly throat and then you think, oh, maybe I'm becoming a bit sick. It's that irrational fear of becoming sick or becoming seriously unwell.
And have you noticed an increase in the number of people coming to see you as a psychotherapist for treatment post-pandemic?
Yeah, so based kind of generalising and based on my own clinical practice and my clinical work, I have seen a rise in people seeking support for health anxiety or other mental health issues that have maybe been triggered due to COVID-19, for example, depression as well, coming under that bracket. But also thinking about those patients who maybe did suffer from anxiety and how the pandemic increased that for them. And also when we had a lack of support system at the time that maybe that was really needed. So there has almost been a backlog and I have seen an increase in my clinical work.
Is it fair to say then, Jade, that patients, clients who come to see you had a backdrop of mental illness or emotional needs before the pandemic that have been exacerbated by it? Or are you seeing people who were previously fully functioning, living a normal life, not suffering from depression, not having anxiety, but that the pandemic has swung their moodometer towards anxious?
Completely both of those. So I've had clients who have, like I said earlier, suffered from mental health conditions, whether that be anxiety, depression, OCD, and that the pandemic has exacerbated that. And then also clients who have come to me who maybe they have become anxious because of the pandemic, that are really seeing some health anxiety symptoms coming through.
Ivor, we could all see this coming, couldn't we? I mean, surely. I mean, in terms of talking about risk and benefit, the government, they may have done a risk-benefit analysis of lockdowns, but if they did, they never showed it to us. That's another failure of this process, isn't it, to make this very important calculation?
Yeah, there's been an absolute, lack of risk-benefit across the world. So the 2019 WHO guidelines are clear, decades of Western science. You don't lock down, you don't isolate asymptomatic, yada, yada, yada. But the cost-benefit should have been, of course, been done. Just to give an example to people, the Irish data from the Central Statistics Office is very good and it's all divulged. And for a person under 50, quite clearly, 1 in 50,000 risk for the group under 50. And that includes all the comorbidities and people with severe issues, in fairness, and also that's with a positive PCR.
That's the risk of death, not just severe illness.
Of death, exactly. And death is the measure, the key measure, because everything else correlates with death. So if we take Sweden, for instance, they had one of the lowest excess mortalities in the whole pandemic period. It was published in the Telegraph 2 weeks ago. They had no lockdowns, no masks, and kids up to 16 in school. And CNN went there in May 2020. I have the video, in case it disappears. And they were in the cafes, in the bars, and elderly women were getting their haircut, and they interviewed them. It was shocking to CNN. But with that, they're the lowest excess mortality in Europe. And people then say, oh, well, maybe the mortality wasn't affected, as The Lancet published in 2020, no effect on mortality from lockdown. But also their ICU loading was no different than the countries that locked down hard. So all of these measures are kind of independent largely. And Johns Hopkins yesterday just published a study, Johns Hopkins, and they have said the same thing, that maybe 10,000 people might have been saved across 1 billion people in America and Europe.
Jade, I have a fun game that I like to play, which is when I get into taxis and I always chat to the drivers. First of all, I make them put on GBNews radio so I know what's going on. And then I say to them, have you been over COVID? And we have a little chat. And then I go, what do you think the average age of death was in this country from COVID-19? What do you reckon? Because I find it perpetually entertaining when they say, 25, 40. Some of them say, 50. And when you say the average age of death was 82, and our life expectancy is 81, they go, really? No. And it's like a light bulb. They realise, what do you do in your therapy room? Not that. I'm guessing you can have that, Jade, if you want to take that back and try that with them. That might work therapeutically, I don't know. But what do you do in terms of treating people to embolden them again, to realise that they have to reassess their parameters of risk?
So I don't use that technique, but I guess a good place to start would be making them more aware of their thoughts and starting, because you can't do any work if somebody isn't self-aware, and usually these irrational thoughts aren't coming from a place of being self-aware. So the first stage in, therapeutic treatment would be working on some self-awareness skills and, even just sometimes talking it out out loud can make them almost hear it back, and then they suddenly start to question and become that a little bit more self-aware. But it's also a case of becoming aware of how exposed we were for the past 2 years through the news and media about, there was a constant death toll that was on the news, and all these stats and figures were kind of thrown at us. So also thinking about how aware we were then, and also how that might have changed now going back into normality. So a good place to start is about thinking about your thought processes, and really working on that self-awareness.
And Ivor, one of the things that I've been frustrated with, and I'm sure you have as well with your interest in lifestyle-induced illnesses and chronic illnesses and obesity, the one thing we didn't do during the last 2 years was to educate people, to empower them to take care of their individual health, so to control the controllables. Is that something that you think would help people who now are frightened and just not feeling strong?
Yeah, absolutely, because I remember a psychiatrist I interviewed once said, believe it or not, your brain is part of your body. And metabolic health has a huge connection through to neurological health in general. So you can get an amazing boost in neurological health and these depression-type problems by reducing insulin resistance, etc. And even on COVID, the funny thing is, Israel came out with a study a few weeks ago, and many more studies said the same, that a low vitamin D level was associated with, I think it was 18 times or 14 times the risk of severe outcome. And there were many studies in 2020 showing this. But you raise your vitamin D level by reducing your processed food, by getting healthy sun exposure, by many pathways, not just supplements. And you can do that. And we could get that advice to people, and it would help them in every facet of their lives, including hugely reduce COVID burden. But we didn't.
What do you think, Jade, is the long-term danger if we don't de-radicalise, particularly the young generation as we come out of this, and to empower them to understand that, life is tough, but they are tougher? What are the longer-term implications?
So there's actually some, again, basing this off my clinical work, but also basing it off some research that I've read, that there's significant evidence to show that there is a decline in resilience in young people and in children. And with that, rates of anxiety and depression are increasing. And also that younger age groups may be more vulnerable to the mental health impact of the pandemic. So, and it actually suggested, this piece of research in particular suggested that one of the reasons for this is that we've actually seen a rise in helicopter parenting, which is the type of parenting that suggests that the world is not safe. Obviously understandable coming out of the pandemic that might be the type of parenting that is happening, but also the type of parenting that might be, I'll do it for you. So obviously, as a result of that, we're seeing a decline in resilience in young people. And also society's views on mental health are really changing as well. It's much more socially acceptable to admit that you are struggling with anxiety or with health anxiety. And with that, we're seeing a huge increase in psychiatric and mental health diagnoses of anxiety, generalised anxiety disorder, and other mental health illnesses.
Thank you. Last word to you, Ivor. Give me some reasons to be cheerful, because I've got 3 kids. One of them's a teenager. And it's a very fine line between telling them, yes, I hear your anxiety, and telling them to buck up, as my mother would have said. And how do we get that balance right?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's been a grim couple of years. I think cognitive psychotherapy, if people look it up, is a fantastic tool. I've used it with employees and many people over the years. And it helps you take your subconscious thoughts of doom and dread and write them down and then analyse them in the way that I or an engineer would for the actual risk and the actual probability. So all of that, a lot more could be done with. And just speaking in the last word, for Ireland, those figures, under 25, 1 in 500,000 was the risk of mortality. And that includes seriously comorbid. So last word, I say covidchroniclesmovie.com, all one word. We got one of the largest Kickstarters in the British Isles a couple of years ago, and we made a movie that talks through pretty much all of this. It's free.
Right, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Ivor Cummins, aka the Fat Emperor, biomechanical engineer, and expert on chronic diseases and psychotherapist and health anxiety expert, Jade Thomas. Now, just after 10 o'clock, your dose of Mark Dolan as Mark meets England's 2003 Rugby World Cup winner Steve Thompson. He released an autobiography called Unforgettable after being diagnosed with early onset dementia in 2020.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. I have moved. You have been getting in touch. Got my glasses on because I've got to read for you. You've been telling us what you think. Mark says, can I say Mark Dolan is looking better this evening? The new look really works. Thank you. I did find this dress in his wardrobe. He is about the same height as me. Russell says, why can't we make jokes about the LGBTQI LCD TV+? I'm gay, and I don't agree with some of the crowd. Some of us identify as LGB alone. And Emily says, do you not think that such jokes on a marginalised group such as trans people can help stoke prejudice? No, that was the point of my monologue. I don't think they do. I think people like other people who can laugh at themselves because, as I said, we are all ridiculous in some way. So I think, no, I worry that actually the trans community are alienating a lot of people because they appear to take themselves very, very seriously. And we don't wish prejudice on anybody. We don't wish harm on anybody. We just want to all be able to have a nice time and all get along, don't we? Right, back with our panel. Joining me throughout the show, the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, TV personality and impressionist, Francine Lewis, and columnist at The Article, Ali Mirage. Now, guys, you all right? Yeah. You've got a beer. How did you do that?
Negotiated with your colleagues.
I did not know there was alcohol in the house. It was Friday night, isn't it? Now, Rishi Sunak announced yesterday a £15 billion support package to help the UK deal with the cost of living crisis. £5 billion of that money is brought upon by a windfall tax on the energy giants. Other measures include a £650 one-off payment for families on means-tested benefits and an extra £200 for all energy bill payers, which will not now have to be repaid. Most of this is going to be funded through borrowing, but interest rates are going up, so this will harm our economy even more, possibly. Free money taxing some of the country's biggest companies, causing uncertainty in the North Sea, is a recipe for disaster. According to a Shell spokesman, this tax can seriously harm how energy companies in the North Sea secure investment, which of course they need to get the natural resources that fuel our lives. So where does that lot leave us? A lot poorer than when we started, it feels, and even more afraid of the future of our heating. And it's all because of a bunch of bumbling bureaucrats who thought they could be the hero of the day, or perhaps shed some of the drama of Partygate. I have to ask, are we becoming too reliant on the government? Rishi's massive package could end up hurting us more than it helps. Most of it is funded through increased borrowing, which means the interest payments on that debt are rising as interest rates go up. Now, guys, am I cynical to suggest that he made this announcement yesterday, the day after, or the Sue Gray report? Same day. No, day after the Sue Gray report. I've lost track. We've been talking about the Sue Gray report for so long now. It wasn't an emergency budget as such, was it, Peter? It was sort of just, I'm going to announce these changes to help people because the public are crying out for them. And my understanding is if he'd had to do an emergency budget, he would have had to explain where all this money was coming from. What he effectively did was a press release announcing that he was finding all this money without having to justify it.
Well, we've had 3 so-called fiscal events this year already, and it's only May. And, if a Labour Chancellor did that in the 70s, they'd be an object of ridicule around the world. But anyway, let's go to the substance. So I'm glad you accepted at the end of your kind of intro that people are having a difficult time, because I thought a lot of what you said was nonsense. You didn't recognise how difficult it is for people at the moment. But let's go to what Rishi Sunak has done this week. He's been dragged kicking and screaming to deliver some Labour policy. He was too gutless to use the words windfall tax, but he's done this 5 months after Labour called for it. So although it is progressive, i.e. the funds, as they should be, are angled towards people on the lowest incomes, but it's taken 5 months to get there. He's been dragged kicking and screaming to deliver Labour policy. Secondly, it's a one-off measure for a permanent problem. The poorest people are getting poorer, and we've seen that over the course of the coalition austerity. We've seen it now because inflation is going to hit 10% according to the Bank of England. So it's a one-off package of measures for a long-term problem that can't work. And then thirdly, as you rightly said, it's a completely cynical volte-face to distract from the shame and public dishonour of Partygate, which, remember, is not Boris Johnson being ambushed with a cake. It's the hypocrisy of people vomiting, fighting and partying in Downing Street while some of us said goodbye to our loved ones on Zoom.
Yeah. I don't want us to go back down Partygate because I feel like we've done that so much, but I understand people are still really angry about it. And actually, I think there's going to be some stuff that we'll see in tomorrow's papers that we'll have in the next hour or so, which I think it seems like the Conservative Party are now ganging up against Boris and maybe looking to put the pressure on him as an individual. But Francine, people are struggling. People are genuinely struggling.
They are.
We're noticing it in our basic supermarket shop, filling up the car.
Yeah.
It's Rishi Sunak. Does he have any idea what people are going through?
I just don't know how some people are getting through it, to be honest. You know, we are quite a fortunate family. Me and my husband both work. And I'm finding, just going to the supermarket, I can't believe the prices, how they've gone up. And I do like shopping in certain supermarkets. We were talking about M&S on the show not long ago, probably one of the most expensive supermarkets, but I like the quality of food. And when I get to the till and I've just got one bag full and it's nearly £100, it's like, well, what have I actually bought? And yes, filling up the car now, we're all worried about how far we're driving in our cars because, I'm checking, oh God, I don't really want to go all the way down there because I just seem to be spending a fortune in petrol.
But this is also what's kind of crazy is this £400 energy bill rebate scheme will be universal. You don't need it. None of us really need it. It should be means tested, shouldn't it, Ali?
Yeah, look, I think you're right. I don't think billionaires on the Sunday Times rich list need that £400. And I think...
Well, he suggested we donate it to charity.
Well,
that's the,
look, I think Sunak got the balance right. Apart from that measure, I wouldn't have done that. But I think the rest of the packages he came out with were channelled towards the poorest in society. The £650 for people on mean-tested benefits. I think the people on disability allowance, they're getting help. Pensioners are getting help. So I do think that in the round, this £22 billion package was good. It was a big bazooka, as the Prime Minister calls it. But the problem with big bazookas is we already had a massive one, which was $400 billion of borrowing during the pandemic. And the problem with all this is that we are going to get hooked on the opium of public spending. What we should be doing, I think Sunak's right here, he had to do something because the people at the poorest in society are really suffering. And by the way, Francine, Lidl is great. I go to Lidl, right?
Me too.
You can get a lot more for your money there, and the bakery section's
Me too.
fantastic.
Oh,
right?
really? Okay.
Yeah, no, it is. It
I
is
might
good.
have to check.
It is good. But look, Johnson, Sunak's boss, is a cakeist. He believes in having his cake and eating it. The problem is, philosophically, this is taking the Tories away from their DNA, which is tax cutting. And you already see certain people, even within the cabinet, Kwasi Kwarteng, some of the other members of the cabinet, Suella Braverman, etc., really nervous, Sajid Javid, really nervous about this fact that this public spending is continuing. And Rishi Sunak knows that for every 1% rise in interest rates, given we've got 2 trillion of public debt, that means an extra billion on debt service costs. So it's a really difficult position for him. There are 2 things have to happen. Andrew Bailey at the Bank of England has to raise interest rates, which is really tough for people, but he's going to have to do it. And Boris Johnson apparently telling the 1922 committee backbenchers that if interest rates rise, we'll be in real trouble. Well, they have to rise. Inflation has to come under control. And on the other side, Rishi Sunak has to be careful on the fiscal position.
As I say, we're going to get to the papers as well later, and no doubt we will talk about this. After the break, Mark Dolan meets England's 2003 Rugby World Cup winner Steve Thompson. He's released an autobiography called Unforgettable after being diagnosed with onset dementia in 2020. See you in a bit.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening. I am Bev Turner, sitting in for Mark Dolan tonight. Still loads more to come. Wimbledon tennis tournament removing female marital status from plaques. Let's get to the bottom of that. And Mark will speak to England 2003 Rugby World Cup winner Steve Thompson now, after the release of his autobiography, Unforgettable. The once most capped England hooker was diagnosed with onset dementia in 2020. I'm also going to be discussing lots more with my panel. And the Winnie the Pooh horror movie. We've also got tonight's great British game show. That's not that. That's Winnie the Pooh about to murder somebody. But first, the news headlines.
The top story tonight, with protesters shouting outside, America's most powerful gun lobbying organisation has been hosting a convention in Texas just days after a mass shooting at a primary school. The gunman killed 19 children and 2 of their teachers before he was shot dead by officers in Uvalde. And there's been growing demands for US lawmakers to do something to stop the mass shootings. But Vice President of the National Rifle Association, meeting at the convention, Wayne LaPierre, says the atrocity was the act of a lone, deranged criminal.
What we can and should do to prevent the hate-filled, vile monsters who walk among us from committing their evil. Restricting the fundamental human right of law-abiding Americans to defend themselves is not the answer.
Well, in news here at home, a Conservative MP has submitted a letter of no confidence in Boris Johnson following the publication of the Sue Gray report this week. Sir Bob Neill, who chairs the Commons Justice Committee, said the Prime Minister's explanations for his behaviour lacked credibility. It comes after the Tory MP Paul Holmes resigned as a parliamentary private secretary to the Home Office, saying it was because of the toxic culture at Number 10. And the Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner has accused the Prime Minister of trying to save his own skin by changing the ministerial code. Ministers will no longer automatically lose their job for minor violations. Instead, the Prime Minister can choose to order a lesser sanction, including a public apology or a salary suspension. That comes as the Prime Minister himself faces an inquiry by the Commons Privileges Committee into whether he misled Parliament over Partygate.
This is clear the Prime Minister's running out of road and he's desperately trying to save his own skin. It's up to Conservative MPs now to do something about this, to protect our democracy and say that enough is enough. You know, you can't carry on like this. You can't keep breaking the rules and then when you don't like the rules, you change them.
A Metropolitan Police officer will go on trial in February next year, accused of 44 offences, including 21 counts of rape. The alleged offences relate to a dozen women over a 17-year period. PC David Carrick, who served as an armed officer at one time with the Parliamentary Protection Command, has been suspended by the Met. He's pleaded not guilty to 15 of the charges. Well, after 6 weeks of testimony, the jury has finally been sent out to consider their verdicts in the US defamation lawsuit which Johnny Depp and Amber Heard brought against each other. Depp sued his ex-wife for almost £40 million and argued she defamed him when she called herself a public figure representing domestic abuse. Amber Heard countersued for nearly £80 million when Depp's lawyer branded her accusation a hoax. If a decision isn't reached today, the jury will return on Tuesday. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, and you're with GB News. Now let's get back to Bev.
Thank you for sticking around and thank you for all the lovely things you are saying on Twitter. Mark Dolan will be back next week. Of course, I am just the super sub that bring me off the bench. Oh, tomorrow, in fact. He's going to be here tomorrow. I watch every week. I knew that. Right, it is time for Mark Meet, so you do get a big dose of him tonight as well. This is a section in which he speaks to the biggest names in the world of politics, sport, showbiz and beyond. Now, tonight, Mark speaks to an amazing man who's been to the pinnacle of his sport, but it has now come, sadly, at a cost. Steve Thompson, a member of England's Rugby World Cup winning squad from 2003, do you remember that? He was diagnosed with onset dementia in 2020. His autobiography, Unforgettable, came out last month, and he's revealed that he had to rely on the memory of his teammates in order to detail some of his proudest career moments, particularly that amazing World Cup win 19 years ago. It is a heartbreaking but compelling story, as Steve explains how the sport of rugby has done so much for his life, but he now believes that it could play a big part in his death. Mark caught up with him recently.
Steve, physically you've been a top athlete. Are you still in good shape?
I have been since the diagnosis, believe it or not. That's really kick-started me to train again. So I jumped on the old Peloton bandwagon But I must admit, it's the best thing I've ever had. So yeah, I train every day now, and I look to do some big long cycles a few times a year. But it's more because I've got young kids, so I just want to make sure I can do as much as I can to stay as fit as I can and as healthy as long as I can.
Of course, one of the greatest moments of your career was the 2003 World Cup final. You must be sick of questions about it. But you were there, you made sporting history. I know your memory is hazy, but what are your emotions when you watch it back with friends and family?
The thing is, it isn't even hazy. Like, I can't even remember being in Australia. Like, I've lost a big block of about 10 years of my life, really. That I'm going to be, when I watch it, I've had to watch it a few times over the last few days, really. Just emptiness, if I'm honest. It's weird. It's not even the emotion, because it feels like I'm supposed to have an emotion towards it. I feel even less than if I was watching England without me playing in it. I'd be so happy that England's won the World Cup, but because there's supposed to really be emotion from me because I'm there doing it, playing it, it's even worse because it's weird. I sort of see myself as a bit of a liar, really, because, you know, people ask me that and it's happened and I've seen it, but I don't know anything about it. So it's quite a bizarre sort of feeling, really. And I don't even get goosebumps or excitement when I see it happen. So like I said, yeah, it's more of an emptiness when I see it.
Is it like watching somebody else in the scrum rather than you?
Yeah, totally. It's just someone that looks like me, someone, you know, big, fat and ugly. So, you know, it's just like, it looks like it should be me. But yeah, it's like I'm watching England play now, but there's someone that looks quite similar to me there.
Now, I know that you've watched the run-up to that World Cup glory with a colleague and you don't remember too much. Thank God it's obviously part of your legacy. Are you still in touch with the people you played with?
A couple, like Ben Cohen and Lewis Moody, I'm close with. And I was close when I was young with them, and then also afterwards now. So it's weird because we get together and they'll start putting out photos of us being in, you know, in what was it called, Manly, and having coffee and stuff like that. I'm just, no, not at all. Like, and they'll just, it's bizarre. And they just keep, you know, I've been on the set of Lords of the Rings in New Zealand, and I didn't even know I'd done that. So it's weird. It's as if I'm learning new things. So my kids think it's amazing because they're like, oh, look, because, you know, people are giving me pictures and they're like, oh, you've done that, Daddy. And I'm just, no, I just don't know.
If you can't have a grasp of those specific moments or occasions, how about the relationships and chemistry with people like Ben Cohen? Is that something that has stayed with you more than the occasions themselves?
Because I knew them before, and it's weird. Like, I've had you know, I moved away to Dubai, so I was away for years as well. But it's a weird sensation that I meet some people and it's like, oh, I should like you. Plus, I've got close friends. You know, my closest friend and one of the closest friends, like Ben Cohen, but then also Simon Heathell, turns around to me and it's a bit like, for some reason, I don't like that person. I'm not sure why. And he's like, no, you shouldn't. He's a bit of a pain in the backside towards you. See what I mean? Stuff like that. And then, and it's weird. Or like people come up to me and they'll say, oh, hi, Steve, lovely to see you. I spent time with you when, you know, in early or mid 2000s. And I'm just like, sorry, I'm really sorry. I just haven't got a clue. And, you know, it sounds awful. Sometimes, like, oh, yeah, because you don't want to be rude. But then suddenly I'm thinking to myself, am I being ruder by just agreeing? You know, because obviously they do know because the way they're behaving towards me. But other times I'm just like, I just don't know.
What have been your emotions surrounding your diagnosis, Steve? Is it anger, acceptance, disappointment? How do you feel on a daily basis?
It's all up and down, really. And you know, I'm sort of coming to a bit more grips with it now, and the family, we're all getting used to it. And relief, I must admit, at first, because, you know, when you've been going through the testing and everything like that, because of COVID, it was taking longer, and, you know, and everyone involved was brilliant, but it just, like I said, it just took longer, like everything did, didn't it? Let's be honest. So, you know, there was like denial as well at times. I think, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I feel, you know, when I'm having a quite, I'm absolutely fine. And suddenly, bam, I just go, memory starts going, you know, and I just start getting worried about even going out and doing stuff. But, you know, I'll be honest, I've been very close to taking my life and committing suicide, and that's been really hard. And when you see, the last thing I want to do is drain from my friends and family. Be one of these people when the phone rings, they go, "Oh, what's going to be his mood now?" And so I've gone on to medication, which it sounds bad, but I'll speak up front. Like, I always thought I'd never be one of those people, but I am now. And I look at it and I think, well, if I can make my life better, it's not about me really. It's about my kids and my family and my friends. So if I can level myself out and be more consistent, because that's the most tiring part really. This is the inconsistency, the sort of anger on one side, and then suddenly the loneliness and worrying on the other, and it just drains you. Like it just gets to a point where, I was open and I say to people, like, I was one of these, if people committed suicide, they were weak, and that's the way I used to see it. But in that moment when you're close to it, you're probably the most selfless person in your mind there is, because you just had enough, and you don't want to drain other people, and you don't want to take other people down, and that's why I know people do it now, because I've been there myself and close to it. But understanding what's wrong with me now, I've got something to battle against and think, right, there is something wrong with me. It sounds bad, there's something to blame, but I can't blame that totally. I've got to fight that now and just get myself as better and as more consistent for everyone than I can. The thing is, there's hundreds of us out there now. There's a few. A couple of years ago, Alex Popham has just been phenomenal, helping us, and he's one of the first that came out, and he's been like a driving force behind this. And I lent on him a lot at the beginning, but then suddenly there was 8, 9, 10, 20, 30, 40, and then now we're in the hundreds that have been diagnosed, and there's just so many more. And once I put my head out above, because I had a nice quiet life and that's what I wanted, but now it's like to do the book that I've done, and for people to come out and already start saying, Steve, like, it's unbelievable. And that's non-sports people as well, like people that have got family members with dementia, or people that are actually suffering with it as well, their early onset dementia. They're just like, it's just made a lot more people realise what it's all about, and hopefully just recognise what people are going through, and understand it really.
The book's incredible, so moving. Tell me about the process of putting it together. Was it therapeutic for you?
Believe it or not, it was. John Woodhouse, who wrote it with me, was just phenomenal. Like I've been asked to do books and I've never been interested, but I sat down with John and he just got it straight away. Like, I had one meeting with him. He put together a small clip of what he believed we should do. I come up with the idea of talking to other people and for them putting in the sections that I didn't remember and understand. And the big thing for me is for my kids. It's a bit like a memoir type thing really as well, so they understand. And also, you get a lot of people at people's funerals and they don't generally have a bad word about someone, and I don't want that. I wanted people to say, to be fair, he is a bit of a pain in the ass. He's not the nicest person at times, because no one's perfect and everyone's, so it's good. So it's got a bit of everything in there, but then also it's got the understanding what the family are going through, and what I want them to see me as, and hopefully I can sort of last and know that I fought as well, and I'm still here. We've still got, it could be a few years, it could be a long time. I'm doing the most I can. The big saying I say is like, I want my kids to come and see me. I don't want them to have to come and see me in a few years. So, writing that, hopefully it gets a bit of everything. I've seen people sort of come up to me and shake me like a little bit and say, what you done to me? 1 minute I'm laughing, 1 minute I'm crying, but then also I'm getting understanding and learning as well. And they're like, I had a good child friend phone me up and he went, "Cool, this is unbelievable, Steve. I'm reading it," and he's known me like for years, and he was like, "It's just so true." Like, and I said, "Well, it is what it is. I'm not someone that's going to tell fibs and stuff like that. That's exactly, I've laid it out there, and so is everyone else that put into the book as well." And like I said, John Woodhouse was just phenomenal.
You said that realistically, knowing what you do now, you would not have played rugby in the first place, and you don't want your kids playing under these circumstances. Do you have any anger towards the rugby authorities for presiding over a culture that caused this to happen?
Yeah, you've got to be. There's a lot of frustration, and there's a lot of people that have lost their lives now. And it's not until you start scratching the surface that you start seeing stuff come out, and you start looking, and you look back, and there's been evidence out there for 100 years of what's going on. And for us to open our eyes and just to see like the whole, we put our boots on, we trained, we done the best we could, and hopefully I've done the best I could, and we achieved what we achieved. I just wish other people in their roles and their jobs everywhere involved it had done the same, because if they had, I don't think we'd be in this position.
And I understand that you're getting support for your mental health as well. Tell me about that.
I'm currently working with a Dr. Gavin Newby, and he's a neuro psychologist, which is the big one. So that's just learning how the brain's working and how it's been damaged and how to get the most out of it. So he explains that my brain's like an old Nokia battery. So one of them, remember them where you sort of unplug it and suddenly it's on 50%, but it had 100%, and that's the problem with my brain. I just keep shutting down. So before I didn't understand that, so I was just shutting down all the time and being emotional a lot more and forgetful really badly and things. Whereas now, like today, this morning, I've just slept, chilled out because I knew I was doing this. And then after this, I'll have a nap. And I think I'm 43 years old. Why on earth was I doing that? Because I never needed to, but I have to now because I've got to understand what's going on. So Dr. Gavin's been phenomenal for me. And then also like the medication side, I've just started medication, and there was a big sort of, pushback from me on that at first, because, I see myself as being sort of a bit old school, and suddenly you fix yourself, and excuse the phrase, and I'm sorry if I get shouted at for saying, but in the old days they used to call it happy pills, and you used to see people go on them, and they just weren't with it, were they? They were sort of just not, and I just didn't want to be like that. Obviously, I wanted to be the best I can, but on the other end, I had that worry of, and they're like, look, Steve, that's completely changed now. The medication you can go on now can sort of level you out, because I don't want the high. I'm actually more scared of the highs than the lows when I'm up and down. So these sort of take a bit of the edge of both off, and the emotional side to it. And that's what I've said now. I've had my life the way I look at it. I've got my young kids, and I just want to be the best I can for them, really. So yeah, the understanding's getting there, and I'm on red light treatment that helps me with the inflammation. I'm on with thin air as well. I'm there with like an oxygen treatment with them, and that's been phenomenal just to get my body back and try and just get some of the damage from the brain, the inflammation that was on the brain down, and get my body working and the oxygen in my body. And I'm trying all different things, and I've been lucky enough now as well. I've started a role with Medigold Occupational Health, and the big part of their company is mental health. And I can't back this up at the moment, but through what I'm learning quite quickly now is a lot of this mental health could be down to brain injury as well. So it's not, this time of the year, a lot of people go skiing. So they have a fall on the slopes, go to the bar later on, carry on, don't think anything. It can be a few weeks later, suddenly start feeling tired, a bit emotional, and that could be down to a brain injury. So it's not just, it's a pure mental health, what's going on. So if people can get diagnosed with this now, you can understand it more. And that's what I'm trying to do now, with Medigold, and they've been phenomenal, because I know I'm lucky. I've had to quit my jobs. I couldn't work on big sites. I can't, like the office, sometimes a lot of times I'll come out of meetings, I'm just thinking, what has just gone on there? And the problem is I'm talking quite well. My vocabulary's shrunk considerably, but doing like the audio book was just, the first session was horrendous, because they put me in this little room and obviously put the iPad in front of me. So I started reading, and suddenly after a couple of minutes, the other chap who was there with me, Stephen, came and he said, Steve, what are you reading? I'm like, I'm reading that. He was like, you're not. And he said, so he got played back, and it was just like, what I was reading to my brain, to my mouth, had completely changed. And once again, that was another sort of low blow for me, because I thought I'd got as low as I could. And then so I come home, spoke to the kids, and I said, look, when I read you a nighttime story, do I read the book that I'm reading? And they're like, sometimes you do, and sometimes we thought you were just making it up. Or little jokes with my wife Steph on Twitter. You read a joke, and she'd laugh, and she was like, oh no, I sort of understood what you were talking about, so I'd laugh. So it was another thing. I just didn't know what was going on. So it's sort of another thing that sort of taken away, but then on the other hand, we sort of laugh about it. And my kids, in this family now, we've got a bit of a dark sense of humour, and that's how we sort of get through it. And the kids are brilliant, they're loving when they need to. And when I'm sort of having a bit of a bad time, but I'm not too emotional, they sort of just take the mick out of me a bit and stuff like that, and sort of laugh about it and try and tell me different names when I can't remember their names and things. But we're one of them. That's how you get it through it, isn't it? It's one of them. It's we're all sort of, it's weird looking at a half pint full.
Yeah.
Like Christmas was brilliant this year because of Steph. Normally I'll cook on a big dinner on a Christmas Day, but this is like the way life's changing, so we're having to organise things. So Christmas Day, up early like you do, open the presents, and then rather than me cooking big dinner and that, so I've had an early start, sort of quite emotional with the kids, and that's brilliant. And suddenly start cooking. We just had sort of nibbles all day, and then I played with the kids, had a nap, came back, played with the kids a bit more. We had earlier sort of night. Then the Boxing Day, I got up. So the kids then, we said, right, go on your computers and things. If you want to speak to your friends, you can. But then, and then it was a bit of family time. Then I started cooking. So we had 2 great days, whereas it would have been 2 bad days because I would have tried to do too much, fall apart, got angry around the kid, would have, it wouldn't have been great. But so looking at it, if anything, I think even if I didn't have dementia, but doing that suits the family as well. So we're actually working out ways to have good family time, really. And that's good for us.
Is there a long-term prognosis for your cognitive health, or is that an impossible question to answer?
It's getting worse. I know it's getting worse. And my wife, she's seen that it's getting worse. But time frame, because it's the probable CT, obviously you can't get that until after you've died and they can dissect your brain. But we can see that things have got worse over the last couple of years. But then suddenly, hopefully, with modern medication and things like that, but then also lifestyle now, like as well. So you try all the little 1%ers to try and help it. I'm trying to do, and I was having to do night work before to work, which is the worst thing you can do because obviously lack of sleep and that. So now I've had to come out of that. So now, I'm getting better sleep, looking at diets, looking at everything possible, really. Like I said, just to give it a go, see if it works. And, it's sort of like a hand grenade. You just don't know when it's going to go off, but it is. And, you look at some people, Dawn Astle, Jeff Astle's daughter, the ex-West Brom footballer, his turned around very quickly, and he passed away very quickly after being diagnosed and that, whereas there's been others that have been 10, 15 years. And there's, a lot of footballers now being diagnosed with it, and they're 60s and 70s. So I'm hoping, hopefully we can sort of drag this out. But, like I said, rather than looking at the past, just looking at the near future as such and things like that. And then, we'll start planning after that happens. And I think, with COVID, looking at, sounds awful, another negative, but looking at it positive, we've had some great family time, brought some old family traditions around, like eating around the table every time together, walks together, everything like that. So, you just look at bad situations and try and flip them a little bit and think, do you know what? It's not that bad, really. It could be a lot worse, and we've just got to try and get it. And for me, the amount of people that have come forward and saying, like, thanks so much for doing the book. You've helped us. So many people, like, that's really helped for me, because a lot of people turn around, oh, how many books is so? And I'll be honest, I'm not that bothered. That sounds bad. The book company might go mad at me for that, but I'm not. I'm more bothered that it's helping people, and that was the point of doing it. And for me, if people, and it's non-sports people as well that are saying, Steve, like, this is unbelievable. Thank you so much. And, it's one of them ones, until you mention it to someone, no one talks about it. And then suddenly now they know. So many people, my mum, my dad, my nan, my granddad, my auntie, they had dementia. That was horrendous. Steph's nan, she passed away a few years of dementia. And that's like one of the things at the beginning when I was being tested. She even said to the doctor, So what was I saying then?
You were saying your wife's grandmother had dementia.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. She had dementia and she passed away. And so Steph said to the doctor, she said, it's really weird. It's like he's got dementia, but I know he hasn't because he's too young. And the doctor couldn't say anything then because she was testing us. But then, of course, then a diagnosis came in and it all came together sort of thing, really. So, you know, and I'm speaking to a lot of the other lads now as well that are, you know, some are in their 30s and they're suffering as well. So you just, you know, we're sort of coming together. And like I said, with Alex Popham and going there and doing what he does, you know, we're really starting to hopefully not turn this around because it's so bad, but people are starting to realise and know that there's help out there. And you know, I've tried to go down, and I don't want to kick the NHS route or anything like that, but people just not recognising this, you know, in young men or young women, young people. So, you know, I went to see one specialist and he said, Steve, it's nice you're here, but you won't be seeing me again because you're under 60. We don't treat people. It's like you. At first, he was like, you haven't got it. And then suddenly he looked at the results and he's like, all right, yeah. He said, but I still can't, we don't see anyone under 60. So I was like, where do I go? And he's like, I don't know. And that's, you know, that's the worrying thing now, that there are going to be hundreds, and the cost of homes for people. And it's, you know, like I said, we're young. So we could be going in homes in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And there's no homes that take people for under 60s. You know, you're looking at £100,000 a year, and that's if you can find somewhere. But you know, we're big lads. You know, so if there's one place in a home and there's someone that's 6'3", 18, 19 stone, and sometimes can flare up a bit because of this, or you've got someone that half his size, who are the home going to take? Because it's only fair on the people that work there and the people that are there as well. So, you know, there's sort of that I'm trying not to worry about, but you've got to talk about it because it's thinking, right, when it does occur, we need some sort of help for that. So, you know, it's one of them. You sort of look at it, you try and be happy and things, but then it's sort of worrying as well, like, you know, what is going to happen.
How do you feel about being a lab rat for all sorts of alternative treatments for dementia?
Exactly. So that's the main thing, isn't it? Like what everyone's been through these last few years. Suddenly, you know, there's one thing we should all do is just be nice to each other, you know, because, you know, I think that's what you need. And, you know, there's a little bit too much sort of nastiness and that around, I think, at the moment. Everyone thinks someone's better than everyone else. There's no need. Let's just try and help everyone and just live life to what we can.
Back to rugby, if I can, Steve. What could the RFU do to better protect players going forward?
Lower the amount of contact in training. That's got to go down considerably. Also, at the professional side, because obviously you've got the amateur side, and that really needs to be looked after as well. But if looking at the professional side, players should be tested and baseline tests done properly. You know, the saliva tests they're looking into, blood tests, brain scans. So it's a regular MOT. Players will be looking at probably retiring earlier, perhaps, or have a higher chance of retiring. But we would rather them retire healthy than be like me in their 30s and 40s, to be honest. And that's what we've got to look at as well. And like I said, if we could lower that amount of contact and the exposure to the subconcussions, that's a big step forward.
Steve, you've been a hero on the pitch and a hero in your book, All Again, with your message about dementia, and you're a hero to your family as well. So it's been a privilege to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us on GB News.
What an amazing man. And I can tell you that from my own experience of acquired brain injury, that interview and his book will do a huge amount of good for families. Now, coming up after the break, we'll take a look and react to tomorrow's front pages. Also, should Wimbledon tennis drop Mrs. and Miss on the honour roll? Find out about that in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening, it is just after 10:30, so time for a look at tomorrow morning's papers, hot off the press, literally hot in my hand here. The Eye has Tories warn Johnson he faces defeat at the election. This is YouGov modelling. Oh, they do love a bit of modelling, don't they? Found that the Tories would lose all but 3 of their 88 key battlegrounds at the next general election, including Boris Johnson's seat. The Mirror, the Daily Mirror, has, well, they're going towards looking to the Jubilee at the weekend. Heirs to the Future, Queen's Jubilee finale plan with Charles, Wills and George. Daily Telegraph, they've got a story, former Royal Marine helping save fellow Britain during battle in Ukraine. And then also Johnson faces mutiny as 2 more MPs call for him to go. It does feel like the pressure's ramping up a bit there. The Mail, surprise, surprise, they've gone with Jubilee. Queen's Jubilee, olive branch to Harry and Meghan. Apparently the Queen is saying to Harry and Meghan, you're all welcome to, but you've all got to play nicely, like a lot of families over next weekend. And the Daily Express, holiday hell, and it's going to get worse. Holidays are in chaos with families jetting off for the half-term holidays. I'm glad we're here, guys, aren't you? Would you rather be here or at an airport, Peter?
Well, I'm always glad to be in here rather than airport, because at airport you're either exhausted, hungry, too hot or too cold.
Right, that's a very miserable take on things. Francine, wouldn't you like the idea of travelling now or not?
I just came back from Italy, actually.
Oh, nice. And how was it?
It was fantastic. The airport was so quiet, and it was very easy. The only thing is there was a 3-hour delay coming back, and that was a bit of a nightmare because I had a late flight. But apart from that, the airports were all... Yeah, fantastic.
Really?
It
Ali?
wasn't crazy at all.
Yeah,
Have you travelled much?
Yeah, I came back from Florence a couple of weeks ago. I shall be going to Newcastle in a week or so, and then I'll be going to Cyprus as well on a business trip. So
I like the fact that you included Newcastle
it's
with Italy.
a lovely place.
And
it's got a great airport as well.
Do you fly? Do you fly to Newcastle?
Yes,
London?
I will be flying to Newcastle. Yes, I will.
Is that not a little extravagant in these green times?
No, it's not.
It's probably cheaper than the train.
No, it's not.
It's definitely cheaper
No, it's
than the
not
train.
because I think it's important to support the airport as well.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
OK. Right. Let's have a look at which one do you want to talk about, Peter? It's
Well,
up to you. I did say in the break, should we talk about the Jubilee? And you said, well, it's a non-story, really, isn't it? Don't be like that. The nation has to come together next week.
Peter.
We've got cake to eat. We've got street parties to have. We've got stupid paper things with Union Jacks on to buy.
I'm looking forward to the Jubilee. I've got a couple of parties in the diary and I've already baked my cake and it's in the freezer. But I think the Daily Mail, much as I love it, the Daily Mail has not managed to treacle out a decent story yet for the weekend. The Queen loves her grandchildren. She wants to see them.
Yeah.
I think that's true of most grannies and granddads. Obviously, the royal family have a bit more melodrama attached to them. But I think traditionally, a lot of papers have a slightly lighter story on a Saturday as their splash. And so, obviously, a few royal correspondents have been sent off to look for an exclusive, and, you know, Queen loves her family. Well, I think the Queen's judgment has been very good throughout the Harry and Meghan turmoil. She's shown a lot of restraint.
Well, she's just kept it zipped, hasn't she? That's what she does so well, just...
Yeah, and then occasionally she puts out something positive saying that they're always welcome, which is exactly what you'd expect of a grandmother.
Of course they're welcome, because they need material for Netflix. Of course they need things coming. Come on.
You've got to think that it's going to, you know, it's going to be a bit tense, isn't it, round at Buckingham Palace?
Well, yeah, they'll have the full-on camera crew with them, won't they?
They can't let them in with the camera crew, surely.
Well, if I was a Queen, and Her Majesty is obviously very, skilled at dealing with such situations, I'm sure she'll stick to the weather when she's discussing with them.
And I think at the end of the day, family is family. I know it will be awkward.
Is it?
God, I would love to be in that room and they're all
Twisting
together.
the knife with Oprah Winfrey family?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really surprised that they're coming over, actually. I'm really surprised, because if you think about all the things they've done, like you say, the Oprah documentary, we've got the Netflix deal, we've got the book still to come.
The advice on the fact that his brother and his father are trapped. Remember that compassionate advice?
Awful.
To that?
I mean, do you know what? It's so British, isn't it, that they're all going to just ignore it, and then at some point, I like to think over the croquet potatoes, that someone's going to lose their shizzle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's generally what happens.
Be like EastEnders Christmas dinner. But the thing is, it's Harry is the Queen's grandson, and no matter what he does, who he's married to, I guess that's grandson, and you accept. You'd like
to think so. Let's just, I think it may not be so much tomorrow, but on Sunday as well, Tories warning that Johnson faces defeat at the election. Is his goose cooked, Peter Edwards?
I think his goose has been put in the oven. The temperature is building, but it will take a few more months before we're all eating it. Ultimately, it's often been said it's a Tory party that's going to get rid of Boris Johnson. There's no election coming up soon. Labour can win as many votes it likes in the House of Commons. Most people don't follow every vote in the House of Commons. I don't think I do either. The most likely way of getting rid of Boris Johnson is going to be the Tory party. Remember, it's Tory party who got rid of Thatcher. David Cameron quit before anyone even had a chance to get rid of him, and obviously they forced out Theresa May. But clearly, the thing about Partygate, the Tories had a very cynical strategy of flooding the media with information so voters get sick of it. But if it's a backbench Tory MPs who are worried about losing their seats and they're worried about lying, that's why I think his goose is slowly being cooked.
OK. Right, there is going to be more on the papers at 11 o'clock with headliners with Andrew Doyle. Now, though, moving on, Wimbledon, it's next month, right? Crowds swarming to London during the summer to enjoy their strawberries and cream, get heady on Pimm's and burn their faces in the sun. And let's not forget some of the all-time greats, such as Andy Murray, Novak Djokovic and Miss Serena Williams. Did you notice something there? That's right, historically, any male winner of Wimbledon gets their name on the honours board without their title, while the women are referred to as Miss or Mrs, as though marital status is only relevant if you are female. The new rules will also correct the name changes of divorcees. Now, is this a step in the right direction or a needless break from tradition? Francine, what do you think?
I think, does it really matter? Like, I just think all these things now we're so concerned about, and it's just ridiculous. I'm assuming it's because tennis was a very male-dominated sport years ago. So, it was mainly men's names on the board. And then when the ladies came in, it became, Miss. But you know what? I just think whatever floats your boat. It wouldn't bother me whether it's just my name or if they put Mrs. or Miss or Ms. if you want to be called whatever. But you know what? If it makes a difference to women, they prefer that, then great. But I just don't
I think it is a very old-fashioned thing, isn't it? So I used to be a Miss, I got married, and I didn't become a Mrs. So I got married, well, I'm divorced now, so luckily I never became a Mrs, because it would have been awkward right now. I made the right decision in retrospect, because I had to become Ms, MS. It's not satisfactory. It's a ridiculous word that doesn't have a vowel in it. But it was important to me, because I wasn't taking my husband's surname. I didn't want to be Mrs. Turner, because that didn't make any sense. I didn't think it was right that I had to betray my marital status when men didn't. You ever thought about this before, Ali?
No, not to the degree you have.
Are you married?
No.
Have you ever been married?
No, I haven't been
You see,
married,
but
but I think marriage is a wonderful institution.
You see, but I would never know that about you if you wrote your name down, whereas you would know it about me.
Indeed, and look, I think it's up to women if they want to be known as Mrs. or if they want to keep their maiden name.
Yeah.
As was the case with my mother, she kept her maiden name. She's a doctor. She wanted for her profession. She did. So it's a personal choice. But on the Wimbledon thing, I'd like to know if any woman has come forward with this as a major issue. I mean, look, we've got war in Ukraine, people leaving the Azovstal steelworks, we've got inflation at 9%, we've got a cost of living crisis, and we're talking about the use of Miss or Mrs. at Wimbledon.
It is
really,
ridiculous.
honestly.
Tim Henman, much as I love him, cannot solve all those other problems. So Wimbledon have to deal with the issues in front of them.
But look, the other thing is, look, I don't know if it's been raised, if it's genuinely been raised as an issue that certain women are taking umbrage at this thing. Fine, let's discuss it. I don't know what the offence could be, but fair enough, happy to hear it. But look, Wimbledon is meant to be the Rolls-Royce competition in the world. It's the one that everyone wants to win. They dress properly, they wear whites, they even have their bags carried on to them in the final, right? Are we going to stop that too now? These are all the touches that make Wimbledon special. I don't see a problem with it, but I'm not a woman. I don't know.
Well,
if there is a problem, then let's
all
hear
right,
it.
so is there a better solution, Peter? Maybe the solution is that men have to declare on their title whether they are married or single. And when I say that, it sounds so ridiculous, but that's what we have to do. And people judge you based on that.
Well, there are lots of judgments that go unspoken in society, sadly, and always will be. But going back to the tennis, I think, I believe in equality. So you either have the titles of men and women and neither. I think there's equal prize money, which is great.
No, hang on a second. I disagree with that.
Could women also play 5 sets?
I disagree with that.
Best of 5 sets.
You mean there shouldn't be equal prize money?
I don't think there should be equal prize money. I don't think it should be equal pay. It should be based on the fact of what brings the biggest audience. And the fact is, men play 5 sets, women play 3. That's not a sexist comment. It's just a fact.
But they're not getting paid by the hour, though.
Exactly, they're still the best tennis players in the world.
It's ratings. So are we saying that female footballers should be played the same as male footballers? Of course they shouldn't. It's about ratings.
No, but that, I think, is a different conversation because that's market forces.
No, but so is tennis. It's viewing figures.
But viewing figures of women's, I don't know the viewing figures of women's Wimbledon final.
I would love to know what the viewing figures are for the men's final versus the women's final.
Ali, I think your analogy doesn't quite stack up because in tennis, we're talking about prize money.
And what about the number of sets they play?
Ali, give me a sec. In tennis, talking about prize money from the championships, or in football, there's also golfing salaries, but that comes from TV and sponsorship income, not prize money from the Premier League.
We've got Raducanu this year, right? If she's not good, if she can't shift tennis kit, no one can because she's amazing.
Yeah.
But she just fallen out of the second round of the Roland Garros. I mean, I'm a big fan of Emma Raducanu, but let's get real here. She had a great run in the US Open, right? But, I mean, Emma Raducanu is not Novak Djokovic at the moment. I hope she becomes Novak Djokovic.
She's only new to this.
Of course
she's a teenager.
Of course she is. Of course she is. Point I'm making is that this is driven off ratings, right? That is what it's driven off.
Look, we've got young British, gorgeous young female player. Yeah. I reckon she'll draw.
I hope she does, and I was rooting for her when she won the US Open. We all were. It was fantastic. But she doesn't need advice from me, but I hope she continues to develop her career on tennis. Everything else will follow.
And won't it be ridiculous that if she wins Wimbledon, they will go to etch her name in the board and say, oh, is she married or is she single? Because that means we've got to denote.
But if they call her Miss Emma Raducanu, so what? What's the issue? What's the issue with that? Why are we making issues where... Is this really an issue?
No, I don't think there is, but you have made a really good point. I've never looked at it like that. Men are always just Mr.
Yeah.
And you're right, some people could judge it.
Of course they do.
They know whether you're married or single.
Yeah.
And it actually,
Yeah.
never thought of it like that.
Good. Well done,
And
Francine.
now I think...
Come again.
I think you're right.
Honestly, they're sticking me on any time now. They've got a spare show. What's Bev Turner doing? Oh, she'll do it. She's cheap. Right, after the break, we'll react to the new images released for Winnie the Pooh, the horror film, and tonight's great British game show. You do not want to miss this. It is called The Price is Right. I've heard that before. We're going to be right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, in very disturbing news, beloved children's character Winnie the Pooh is set to swap his honey jar and cuddly demeanour for a baseball bat and a fit of murderous rage after the first images of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, an upcoming horror film, were released. Disney's rights to the original story lapsed only 5 months ago. Come on, guys, show some respect. And a London-based film production company has twisted them into women-killing thugs trying to survive. Francine, this is meant to be a comedy. Why are they doing this?
I think it's awful. I really, really do. They've taken this lovely story, Winnie the Pooh, these great illustrations, and making it into some kind of horror nightmare, really. You know, kids' stories, kids' films should be left as innocent, not used as adult content. I don't agree with it at all. I think
Do you think
awful.
Is it just attention seeking, do you think, Peter? Is it? They know that we're chatting about it because they've taken something so innocent and then subverted it into something so grotesque.
Well, I think that I won't be seeing this film at all. It's not my cup of tea. I think the company, you're right, they perceive a novelty value and a shock value in being first out of the blocks to essentially corrupt a great legacy. And I'm all for having art that challenges us. And I think some great art like Picasso, you know, was rubbished in its day, and it took a few years for it to be appreciated. But it's really interesting. The word innocence keeps coming up in discussion. That's why we treasure Winnie the Pooh, because it's an innocent story, innocent time in our lives, and that innocence being corrupted.
What do you reckon, Ali? Are we all just being a bit kind of bar humbug and a bit old and kind of we're not accepting that actually culture has to move on?
I watched the trailer. It looked flipping awful.
It does?
To me. It really did look creepy and looked weird.
Yeah.
I would personally want to have committed sacrilege against Winnie the Pooh. If you want to make a horror film which is low budget and doesn't look very good, you could do it with some other sort of figure. You don't have to ruin what is a really treasured childhood thing. So I'm not a fan, I'm afraid.
Well, the director is a guy called Rhys Frake Waterfield, and he said that he wanted to create something quite original. And I thought, well, it's not original.
Story, yeah.
Make up your own story. Don't just steal something which is perfectly lovely and try and make it all sort of twisted. It reminds me a bit of, you know, the movies Ted. Have you seen the Ted movies?
Yes, I did like that, though.
You see, this is what I'm wondering. If they can put enough humour in it, are we going to enjoy it?
Well, Ted was hilarious. I remember watching it on the aeroplane. I thought, what is this?
Yeah.
This is absolutely bizarre, but hilarious at the same time. But I don't think it's going to work with Winnie the Pooh. I really don't. All right, that's a Teddy.
Yes.
But it's not a well-known Teddy.
Yes.
It's just a normal Ted. We all have, different ones. Winnie the Pooh is the Pooh, and you can't change that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It makes me worried for the future of Thomas the Tank Engine and...
Peppa Pig.
Yeah, well, Peppa Pig copyright probably has long to go, but I don't want to see Thomas the Tank Engine headbutting the Fat Controller in future.
Well, this is what's so interesting, isn't it? Because the original A.A. Milne stories are out of copyright. So Disney have exclusive use of their interpretations, like the modern-day interpretations that we're familiar with, of Pooh Bear and his friends. And so they've had to be quite careful to only evoke the original 1920s versions. It's a lot of effort to go to, like you say, when you could just have come up with something original.
Somewhere in Hollywood, a lawyer is getting his or her pencil ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder who it will appeal to. Is it teenagers? Maybe there's teenagers who read this as children or had this read them to them as children. Maybe this would appeal to them in some sort of slightly perverse manner.
I think it's ruining the whole thing, personally. I can't really understand it.
No, I don't understand it at all, but there you go.
Maybe we'll watch it and we'll come back and discuss it. We might be completely wrong, but I think it's a big, fat no from all of us. Now, moving on. A rare Roman coin, OK, that was minted to celebrate Julius Caesar's assassination and that might even have been worn around the neck of one of his killers is expected to fetch £1.5 million when it goes under the gavel on Monday. The Idus of March coin, as it's known, is only one of 3 known to exist and is unique in having a hole in it so it could be worn as a pendant. I would suggest if you have one of the other 2, drill a little hole in it, triple its value, no one will ever know. And this is the inspiration behind today's Great British Game Show. So, guys, you ready for this? We're going to do a can you guess how much these items fetched at auction.
Oh.
I love this. I mean, I literally do this when I have a nice dress and someone will go, oh, Bev, I like your dress. And I go, guess how much? And it's normally like 15 quid from TK Maxx. So let us play The Price is Right. Is there a music? No, there's nothing. All right, thanks, Mark. No music, no sting, no graphic, nothing. I get it. I understand what's going on here. Right, guys. 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR Uhlenhaut Coupe, if I pronounced that correctly. How much? The most expensive car in history. 1955 Mercedes-Benz. Very nice. Do you like your cars, Peter?
Not particularly. But I'll guess 5 million.
Go on, Ali.
1.5.
1.5, Francine.
I'm going to go...
You're a lady with expensive taste.
I'm going to go for, in the middle, 2.5
Oh,
million.
guys, no, come on, raise your game. £115 million for a car.
Wow.
No way.
Most expensive car in history. Can't tell you why, I don't have any more information, but go and Google it.
Billionaires
right.
their money
Oh, my God, this is ridiculous. Britney Spears' positive pregnancy test.
Oh,
Some weirdo bought that. How much did they spend on it? I mean, the bigger question is why. But go on, Peter.
Well, this just makes me feel sad for Britney Spears. Sorry if that's a woolly response. I really have not... If it's Hollywood, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, isn't it?
Sadly not. £3,955. Somebody paid for that. I mean, I have so many questions. Why was she even selling it? Here we go. Salvator Mundi by Leonardo da Vinci. Most expensive item ever sold at auction, known as the Lost Leonardo. Ali?
Probably around 100 million.
OK. Francine, what do you reckon?
I'm going to say 50 million.
OK.
I think a bit more. I remember, was it about 200 million?
340 million.
Oh.
Wow.
Wow.
That's like 1 week of Eamon Holmes' salary at GBNews. Right. The violin that was played as the Titanic sank. How much is this? Or how much would you pay for it?
Oh, that's going to be a lot. I would say about 250,000.
Oh, come on, it's the violin from the Titanic, the violin that was played... Oh, no, hang on, it was played as the Titanic sank. Was it played on the Titanic or did someone... Yeah, it must have been.
It must have been.
Okay. I mean, they've done well to save it. They couldn't save many people, but they managed to save a wooden... OK, that one is 1.3 million.
OK.
Slice of the Queen's wedding cake. Here we go, this feels timely, doesn't it? Always got the zeitgeist. Look at that, lovely. There's a slice left. How much? 700 quid. The flowing hair silver dollar, the first coin ever issued by the United States. Oh, that's cool. Come on, guys.
$10 million.
10 million?
I'm going to go more. I'm going to say 13 million.
7.9 million quid. OK, let's go for some of the weird ones. A vial of Ronald Reagan's blood taken after assassination attempt on him in 1981. Again, for a weirdo. That was John Lennon's tooth. We didn't get to that one. But I want to know how much you would pay for, how much somebody did pay for a vial of Ronald Reagan's blood.
$50,000.
$100,000.
£2,800. Bonkers. Nothing a stranger's folk. Right, thank you for watching tonight. Thank you to my panel, former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, TV personality and impressionist Francine Lewis, and columnist at The Article, Ali Mirage. Mark Dolan is back tomorrow. Headliners is up next with Andrew Doyle. Thanks for watching.
Hello again and welcome to the latest forecast. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Well, the fine weather that we've ended Friday with in the south becomes more widespread this weekend, clearing skies overnight and plenty of warm sunshine by Saturday. High pressure is building from the southwest. That will allow a fine and settled start to the weekend at least. And the brisk winds that we've seen in the north, as well as the showers, well, they're going to be confined to the far north of Scotland by the early hours of Saturday. So, well, basically, lengthy clear spells overnight. Temperatures will fall away and we'll see a few mist and fog patches forming southwest Wales, southwest England, for example. Overnight lows as well will be on the low side with mid to high single figures and in some spots low single figures. So a fresh start to Saturday, but a beautiful start to the day and plenty of warm sunshine for all of us throughout the day. Bit more cloud into the north and the east by the afternoon, and again that brisk wind in the far northeast will make it feel on the cool side, 13 Celsius for northern Scotland for example, but come further south and out of that wind, high teens, low 20s are likely. The wind in the far north starts to affect more areas on Saturday night, so bringing some showers down the North Sea coast, and there'll be one or two showers across central areas as well. But lengthy clear spells for many, once again, will lead to another fresh start to Sunday with temperatures in the single figures widely. But Sunday's a different day for many, especially in the north and the east where it will be cloudier, there'll be showers coming in from the North Sea and that wind will make it feel cool, 11 or 12 Celsius on the North Sea coast. Towards the southwest, one or two showers possible, but feeling warmer, 16 or 17 Celsius. Similar on Monday and Tuesday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on